Welcome to the Dance Centre podcast. I am your host, Claire French, and I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver, Canada. I'll be talking to dancers, choreographers and other members of the dance world here on the West Coast to find out more about their creative work and practices, and to discuss what it means to us to be dance professionals today. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to today's edition of the Dance Centre podcast. Today, my guest is Olivia C Davies, a dance artist, choreographer, community arts facilitator, and emerging curator of Anishinaabe, French-Canadian, Finnish, and Welsh heritage. Originally from Ottawa, she trained at York University and has been based since 2011 in Vancouver, BC, on the ancestral unceded Coast Salish territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Olivia has choreographed for gala presentations, fashion shows, festivals, burlesque reviews, and music videos. She's a full-on interdisciplinary collaborator too. She's a founding member of Matadance Collective, Circadia Indigena Aboriginal Arts Collective, and Crow's Nest Collective. She was artist in residence at the Dance Centre for the 2018-2019 season, where she curated the inaugural Matriarchs Uprising Festival. We'll be talking about that more here in the podcast. And in 2018, she founded Odella Arts as a home for her work and to develop audiences for contemporary Indigenous dance and multidisciplinary arts. She's also one of the busiest artists around, and on top of that, a new mum. I would also like to say personally to Olivia, thank you for all the work you've done during the pandemic, as we are still in it, but also during lockdown and all of that, and productivity and information and sharing of knowledge and bringing people together that you were part of during that time. I think is so important. And yeah, just a personal note, thank you for all you did then and all you are doing. So more information can be found at oliviadavies.ca. So what I'd like to do is now introduce Olivia to you and just ask, to start us off, Olivia, what would you like to tell us about how and when you came to dance and where you are with dance practice at the moment?
Well, thank you, Claire. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be in circle with all the listeners, however you are joining this conversation through the podcast. My mom put me in a dance class when I was 3 years old. I was a little ballerina, little tap dancer for all those preschooling years and never gave up, always danced all through my life. Always had the desire to move, to tell stories. I remember putting on, the living room dances for my family, and really feeling the rhythm of music whenever it was on in the living room. I see that now in my daughter. When we put music on, she starts bouncing around, and it's so cool. Where I'm at with dance right now, it's like, okay, so this journey of being a new mother has definitely shifted what's possible and how that also relates to my body and my movement abilities. I'm certainly feeling the drive as she is becoming more and more of a mover to really start to remember some of my own fundamental movement patterns and really let go and just be in free movement with her when we're rolling around on the floor, shaking around in the living room. And also know that the potential for choreography and choreographic collaborations right now has been feeding my artistic spirit through working. In the summer, I was working with the Squamish playwright Justin Neal to choreograph for his work So Damn Proud, which premiered at the Annex in September. And I had the lovely opportunity of working cross country with Rianne Svelness as a co-choreographer and some incredible dance artists in that project. And then looking ahead to the seeds that were sown this year and that'll start to develop through next year. I'm working on a solo piece with Reina von Waldenberg as a mentor. And that's starting to feel like a really beautiful shift too, from working in ensemble and choreographing work on other bodies to coming back to my solo practice and developing that.
That's so wonderful. I'm amazed really at how, in your short biography video you have on your website, Blood Memory, you talk about your growing up. I'm really moved by how similar our stories are about our childhoods in those ways. But also I don't have children, but I have a niece niece who has just started dancing and going into competitions. Oh dear. But I did all of that. I did all of that when I was a child, and I've adjudicated them since. And so it's lovely because over WhatsApp, she's been showing me them, and we've been kind of talking and rehearsing. And as much as it's not the same as being on the floor with your, own child and discovering, it is beautiful to have that, the lineage, or the, not even lineage really, it's more kind of the connection across generations and the rediscovery. And I know that's something that's been quite big in your work on levels of personal information, finding out your family, all of those things. This idea of rematriation that is really big for you, it seems, and in your solo work, and it seems to me in your larger work in general. And even as you host, your own, you've hosted a lot of conversations and brought a lot of people together. So I wonder if we could maybe go on that path for a little bit, because there's so much we could talk about. Your contemporary practices, refined and sophisticated, and you're working with people outside of the Indigenous community, but you also are doing lots of work on the national, local, national, and international level within Indigenous communities. And I see those threads happening across your work, and the interweavings of all of that is so beautiful. But yeah, I just wonder if there's something you could talk about, that rematriation. I think it's a beautiful word, and I think the way that you understand it and the way you're working with it is really special. So
yeah, I'm very happy to speak about it. I think it's timely too, in the respect to the dearly departed Lee Maracle and her inspiration to so many of us, artists, readers, worldwide, in how the feminist sociology through an Indigenous lens that she was able to so clearly articulate, not only in her essays, but also in her poetry. And that, we lost her last month was a great shock to the community and I think, worldwide. However, it was in finding her work, I Am Woman, that I really started to tap into what that rematriation meant for me. I was also in deep conversation with other Indigenous visual artists at the time who were also collectively working towards how rematriation could exist through their bodies of work. And it was really this returning to Mother Earth and to nature first, and how we can, through our own bodies, then sort of take that love and that care and let it ripple out to our families, our friends, our communities, our planet, and so on and so forth. And I think where I was really inspired was in developing a work titled Rematriate, where the kind of the journey through the life cycle was how I was exploring this theme of from infant to child to mother to crone, and how in moving through that cycle there were also so many highs and lows, joys and fears that I had yet to fully experience as well. And I see now, as I have started to not only be mentored by matriarchs such as, I often refer to Michelle Olson and Star Marenko at Raven Spirit Dance as these women who, not only are they inspiring to me, they show love and care through their work, through their connections, and through their relationships that have absolutely, given me this example of how to develop work, how to develop and foster relationship, and how to create community in such a way that is meant to be generous, is meant to be from this, what is the matriarch, what is the mothering, what is that spirit of giving that is so founded in my idea of rematriation. And then now in my role as a mentor to some younger emerging artists, how the care that was shown to me can also be passed on, and how you were sort of mentioning too, this, like how we're carrying what we were given and passing it forward really feels like the right way of moving knowledge forward and finding to that spark of joy that desire is to continue to work and find ways to connect.
I think that's really interesting as well, because if that is what is inspiring your desire to connect with somebody, then there's, that is first and foremost going to be how those relationships are remembered, experienced, felt by the person in that, communication with you. Yeah, I think that is it's just, we can say, and this is a lot of, what's happening. We can say that that is how we would like to be, but then as dancers and in our profession, it is how we can be, because with our whole bodies, like we can bring that into a room and we can cultivate that kind of environment to create work in and to talk about what we do. And it's sometimes hard to, it can slip, the slippage there, I think, quite often, because we're so consumed, right? We're so in it with our entire bodies in this thing. So I think it's wonderful to remind people that it's a kind of initiation into conversation is also how that's going to cultivate the environment.
Absolutely.
I would love now to just talk about Matriarchs Uprising a little bit. You mentioned how you're mentoring people now, just in terms of arriving in Vancouver and that whole connection you have with Talking Stick Festival. All of those things might come into this, but I know you've talked about it and people can find out that connection. But I'd love to talk about Matriarchs Uprising and this next iteration in February 2022. This podcast will be going out in January 2022, but just for the listenership again, we are talking in December 2021. And so there'll be a little bit of space between this conversation and material and things that will have come out, and the publications and communications that Olivia will be doing and her team will be doing with Matriarchs Uprising between our talk and the actual event. But I do feel like this year there seems to be some more emerging voices in there. And I wonder if that obviously is connected to your mentoring. And could you talk a little bit about that and about your decisions for this Matriarchs Uprising? Maybe even also where the idea for Matriarchs Uprising came from and how it's grown.
Totally. Well, as previously mentioned, Matriarchs Uprising, the inaugural festival, came out of the generous residency that was provided through the Dance Center as an artist in residence in 2018, 2019, with an intention of creating space for fellow women who are creating contemporary Indigenous dance, and also recognizing that the work that had been done, the foundations of the festival, had also come from my experience as part of Indigenous dance in Vancouver that's curated by Raven Spirit Dance. And where that first festival sort of took off and then kind of really grew to the 2020 festival, where we were able to partner with Talking Stick in terms of bringing our audiences together and really sharing that wonderful space of time in February when so many people are looking to attend our Indigenous cultural events thanks to the Talking Stick Festival. I saw a progression not only from being somewhat more hyper local to then growing and including an international community of artists from Australia and New Zealand. And then as we moved into 2021 and sort of looking at, okay, well, so what's going to be possible this year, figuring out how important and how valuable our circle conversations were, and that we could move, we could still move mountains, but that we could still move the focus and the direction of the festival from necessarily having to be an in-person live event to still gathering and having these really rich circle conversations. In 2021, though, we also took a chance at putting a call out for Bring Your Own Project opportunities. And it was through that call that we received wonderful applications from across the country. And then it kind of aligned, well, like, okay, so we want to have some sort of showcase event that feels a little bit more festival-like. And that's thread, or that seam of the tapestry, ended up being what Harvest Moon Showcase was in September. So from May to September, these 7 artists who had applied to the Bring Your Own project were supported not only financially, but also through opportunities to mentor with me. And now I remind myself that I'm not all knowledgeable, or there's many things I still don't know, but I have some lived experience, and I was able to communicate that and be the sounding board for these artists, some of whom had significant experience creating work, and others who, I think of the wonderful Samantha Sutherland, who had not created her own work yet, and this was her first venture into devising her own choreography, her own, and really living in her own choreographic voice. So where we got to with the Harvest Moon Showcase as an example of not only across distance, but like a really multidisciplinary, but a really rich diversity of ways of movement being being still the crux of these projects, but also having funded the filming of them, and recognizing like how working on the land, working in studio, working in theater, we're working in one's living room, we're all going to be an intertwining of different visuals and also artistic visions. Then we started to put our minds, and I say we, my team, our minds towards what our 2022 festival would look like, and really recognizing how this theme of intergenerational knowledge exchange and sharing was, it was already there. It already seemed to be at the surface. So what we're now in the process of really clarifying is how the theme of the 2022 festival not only has these emerging artists who are sharing work alongside more experienced or mid-career artists, but that there will also be a week-long residency with grandmothers from Vancouver's downtown east side, sharing in an improvisational creation process that will be loosely directed and devised by all members of that residency to share towards the end of the festival. We had other ideas around what the festival might look like, and had, again, hopes to include the international voices and some more national voices. At this point, I'm very happy to say, the program that we have managed to solidify is still carrying that theme and that desire of how can we bring forward and hold space for these emerging voices, along with the experienced, the ones who are ready to take the stage, and know that through all of that, there's also, I feel, a requirement or a need for us to remember to also go back to those who have walked these roads before us, so that we can learn and hold that space, but also exchange and share in what we have and what we know.
I think it's beautiful. I mean, I'm just imagining kind of all of the things that will be happening in that festival, and I'm quite excited. But it's the knowledge exchange, as you said, intergenerational knowledge exchange. But it's knowledge sharing, isn't it? It's about the sharing in the experience. So it's not necessarily in that moment about. It's not necessarily about how you have been in this moment before, but how your experiences are brought to a moment and how you share in that moment with other people. I think that's where knowledge becomes experiential knowledge, becomes both present and of the past, and also kind of almost speculative, in terms of what you can achieve together. And you're in that at the same moment, regardless of age or experience or any of those things. That's the shared thing. I think creating more of those is something that I think we crave as creators, but is also something we can it's palpable as creators, when we get there. I want to say when we hit that, but it's the wrong expression, but it's kind of almost like it hits us, right? That or washes over us. It does something. We become subsumed in that sense. And I think you're offering opportunities for that, and for new artists, if you like, as opposed to necessarily emerging, but for them to feel that part of art, and art making.
Yes.
So, and that's where the voice can come, which I think is really wonderful. I'd love to know, really interested in how you managed everything, also a pregnancy and a birth through this crazy time. And I understand that Daisy's your first child, so you can't compare it to another time. Of course. But I mean, obviously you managed all of this and you're used to time management and balancing lots and lots and lots of things. But this is, it's remarkable.
Well, thank you. And yeah, no, I really believe it's been through the support of a loving husband and the care from, an outpouring of care from my community too, who have managed to really make none of this seem easy, but at least seem plausible or possible. I look to Michelle, I look to Star, I look to Justine Chambers, I look to so many, in the Vancouver dance community who are juggling the roles of mother, worker, dancer, choreographer, and know that, albeit it has been somewhat scary and certainly tumultuous at times to be in the pandemic through all of this too. There's been support, there's been love, there's been care, there's been check-ins, and friendships and care packages that keep keep things feeling, a little bit more grounded and again connected, right? Just maintaining that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I feel like there's also a sense of timing for you where there's a making sense of all of these things coming together. Like they're actually able to fuel each other, inform each other, and support each other. All the different roles kind of support each other. That's the feeling I get with Justine Chambers too, and talking with her, and just how they all come in to kind of balance, to create that work-life balance. But also it seems that they are the words you use to describe, how it's a way of valuing and reevaluating, your art making too, in a way, your reasons for doing it, right?
Oh
Your
my
reasons
gosh.
for, yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, and too, like where inspiration comes and when it can be, when it can be met, when the muse and the impulse to create can be honored. So this impulse to create, and where there's space and time for that, and when the redirection of the requirements of being in my motherhood role have also shifted what creation means to me. I guess I'm really feeling to this looking inward to how a personal story that is being developed through over the next couple of years through the work of Straight No Chaser has really come out of deep desire to pull out the mysteries, I guess, of my own upbringing, and know that I can, through an artistic practice, know that I can sort of calibrate that, and also look at it as something of a legacy to my daughter in sharing what it's meant to start this work while pregnant with her, and know that in 10-20 years she might see an archived version of it, and really start to be aware of what I was thinking about, and how I was moving through the motions of these deeply rooted stories and narratives that I feel anyways have to be expressed and have some potential for reaching out to other hearts who may have also experienced some of the similar themes that come up in the work too.
In the Blood Memory trailer, or a movement interview or movement story that's on your website, you talk about being adopted and how the finding your and the process of finding your ancestral relations through blood relations, if you like. But also there's a new weight, isn't there, to that with your own daughter?
Exactly.
And how you're telling your story through that information, and then now, and all of this, like I just think what I think is so wonderful about it is that you are learning about the things that you are able to teach at the same time that you are teaching them. I think that and that cycle, the ebbing and flowing of that, has in it so many amazing personal layers, but then also I think it bridges communities, and it bridges ways of learning, it bridges ways of understanding, and ways in to conversations. And I think it puts that broad perspective on that sense of the importance of finding a voice through looking back and looking forward, but knowing who you are with on the journey. I think that's, I think that's part of what I get from all of the things you've said, as opposed to space you've held for people. But I do want to just mention two things. And one is the 7 grandfather teachings that you mention in that, which I think is, for me, was a lovely way to connect to your discovery of an ancestral, while at the same time I can learn about some of these broader things. And I wonder if is that connected to a particular nation, or is it a universal? Like, could you talk a little bit about those teachings, like how you know of the
Absolutely
broader ones and the more localized, or hyperlocal, as you called it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think along my healing journey, there were mentions, and they always sort of felt a little bit obscure, or a little bit maybe not even obscure, but superficial to these cultural teachings of the Anishinaabe that were, they were called the 7 grandfather teachings. They had these great, often are depicted in different animal forms as well. After sort of kind of sifting through what I could find, it was really a matter of finding the person, the human, the other storyteller of Anishinaabe heritage who could share with me her deeper understanding, and how she's gone into ceremony and cultural teachings with other knowledge keepers, to how these teachings actually form a value system from which so many many decisions have been made and can continue to be made through this lens of the seven grandfather teachings. And at the time, I remember it was 2017, 2018, when I'd started work. I'd embarked on a work with a Maori dance artist as well, Louise Potiki Bryant. And my intention was to find some synergy, find some threads of, like, I guess, connection, and drawing the lines across our Maori, the Maori culture. And that, yes, so that how could we investigate the seven grandfather teachings and find a similar vein or thread through the Maori cultural teachings as well? Now, in that work, Gateways, I had intentionally chosen Gloria May Eshkabak, who resides in Vancouver on Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam territory, but is Odawa from Anishinaabe territory here in Ontario. It was through finding Gloria and having conversations around, well, this is what I'm sort of seeing they are. What do they mean to you? And then how might I sort of realize those understandings through this artistic practice of developing a work entitled Gateways? And of course, turned into a much bigger, as these things often do, a much bigger story, and had much greater weight to it than simply researching, what I might find on the internet, versus actually having a conversation with a knowledge keeper, in this case Gloria, to deepen my understanding and understand the relevance of these cultural teachings. So just to draw that back to blood memory, when we were filming that mini documentary, and Gloria and I were out on the land beside out on Squamish territory, beside the river, and she's sharing she's sharing with me some of the language of our Anishinaabe language, and really giving, through the spirit of generosity, really giving me this opportunity to hold and feel responsible for what, the words she's sharing. For me, felt like this, like a circle ending and beginning of how the teachings themselves brought us together. And now through our relationship, through fostering trust, we were able to, she's also now sharing language with me. I'm bringing that in. I'm now sharing that with my daughter. And it's a beautiful circle to where I kind of came from, a place of unknowing and uncertainty, and letting that feed a curiosity to actually, deepen my connection by finding somebody who has the lived experience that I did not have, and recognize how, as a dance artist, as a choreographer, as a storyteller, that for me, that's my process of extrapolating, diving deeper into the meanings behind these words, and knowing that they can be transmitted through my own body and other bodies through the act of choreography and dance.
Yeah, and bringing together this idea of finding truth. But as an artist, there's a kind of, I want to say, there's a fluidity to that truth, because it's not about fixing it as fact. It's an activation, really, of that and of that thing. And I think it's going to be quite beautiful that you and your daughter will learn so much together, like in all of these ways. I think it's great. So from that conversation just now, I realize you're in Ontario. And as we're having this conversation, you're there. Are you doing a lot of work, like mum first, and then a lot of work online still? Like, are there a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of Zencaster meetings, a lot of things like this still in your life, or is that it?
It is, and it's been really lovely to still feel, connected, and even in some ways even more connected through what this last year has required of all of us. The opportunity to work still as a choreographer in virtual studio spaces has been so wonderful and enriching, and has also brought me to a new level of understanding of what's possible, and how, sometimes that regardless of the distance, we can still communicate and find ways of collaboration that are like, it's kind of mind blowing to know that just a couple of weeks ago, I was in a virtual reality space with dancer Maxine Chadburn through a process that also included collaborators in the UK, and that were, and that we're working towards these eventually in-person, immersive experiences, but that the act of working in relationship to all of those pieces from the comfort of my home has been
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's just
Amazing.
how, and it was in the DIV conversations, Star mentioned, how great it was, how easy it was to be international through the Zoom, through those, to have these conversations that have been available to us. But because of our work being so kind of about embodiment and degrees of embodiment, it feels very different to have those conversations. And now, of course, we've had to find ways to articulate what it is to be in these bodies, in these virtual environments. And so, yeah, I agree. I think that it's those are the parts that are optimistic and positive about all of the connections we've been able to make. And I think we're seeing that in the live work too. So that just brings me back to Matriarchs Uprising just for a little bit. How do you envision the actual programming? Will there be quite a bit, do you think, online or like screen presentations? I suppose you have to have kind of planned for that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we are, our goal and our dream was to host a number of artists from not only across the Great Waters, but across the country. And with the comfort levels shifting, we're also being nimble enough to shift our programming. So we are intending on having the two live evening performances on the 18th and 19th. That'll feature Maura Garcia, who's a dear friend and one of the 2019 performing artists who will be coming up from the United States to share a work on, essentially, it was a work of developing a relationship with ancestors of hers, which I'm very excited to see. And this will be the first live showing of the work. It's something she's been developing through the pandemic, along with Jeanette Kotowicz's work, Quay, which had a digital offering at Dance in Vancouver. However, this will be the live performance, which we're so excited to be able to support and know that it's also a step forward for the festival from having programmed solo pieces for the last 4 years to, I say in some ways, finally having enough resources to share an ensemble work. Now, that said, the crux of the festival being a festival that has an integral part of sharing through community classes, workshops, and conversations, those have shifted to both being to a hybrid of in-person and virtual. So for instance, Christine Friday of Friday Creations has generously offered to share an online workshop about creating dance for film, which has been a big shift in her practice over the last year, along with sharing a beautiful film danced work that she's created over this last year. So I'm sort of fluid, or that there's a compromise to be made, I think, really, in recognizing where people's comfort levels are, but also that those moments when we can gather, whether it's virtually for a conversation or a workshop, or through the on-demand filmed works, which will be available throughout the week, that those will, ideally complement, but also spark new connections and offer new entry points to what contemporary Indigenous dance by women is, and how we might also remember that this theme of intergenerational sharing is, I feel that, okay, so if this festival is going to be hybrid, then how many other emerging voices might be able to access it through it having an online presence that if we were just in person might not be so accessible.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful because, as you're talking, I'm like, we're not really coming out of the pandemic as such, but we are all shifting our thinking towards what it would mean to be post-pandemic. And I think these kinds of, just what you said there about it's access, who has access to it, who realizes what the opportunities are, and whose voices are being made visible at this time and in this transition to allow for the future voices to be visible, which I think is what you're offering with Matriarchs Uprising.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I think that's wonderful. So 18th and 19th of February 2022 are the dates that we're talking about for Matriarchs Uprising.
With a series of workshops, classes, and conversations that actually start as of the 14th. So from the 14th to the 19th, you can expect activations from our Matriarchs Uprising artists throughout that entire week.
Wonderful. And I just want to also say that this is the perfect, opportunity or example of different forms of presentation and how we've become that as part of programming. It's through DIV and through this, there's all of these conversations, and bringing it to different modes of presentation for dance, I think is really, really wonderful. So I think we'll see that in Matriarchs Uprising and all the work you're doing. Will we see your work in Matriarchs Uprising, or are you purposefully not doing that? Just as I close.
Thank you. So my involvement with the grandmothers, with the Downtown Eastside Grandmothers Residency, will be shared on the Saturday. We're intending to have a small group of invited guests to join us in studio as a part of that sharing. I will actually be working on Straight No Chaser the following week in residency at the Dance Center, where again at the end of that week, a small group of invited guests and potentially a live stream of that sharing will be made available. So please watch out for more information about that through the oliviacdavies.ca site, or if you're not already reading our newsletter, you can access that link through our website as well.
And you can also find Olivia through the Dance Center, of course, and we will make sure all this information is delivered in the usual social media ways through the Dance Center as well. But Olivia, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It was a real pleasure, and I look forward to all of your work. Thank you for being such a vibrant part of the community, and being part of our future, all the offerings that we have for the future. Thank you so much, and love to your family.
Thank you, Claire. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
Thank you again.
You too. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. We would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, as this will help other listeners find us and help us to grow our dance audience. We'll be back next month. In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook at The Dance Center, Twitter at Dance Center, and Instagram at The Dance Center BC. And if you'd like to support our work, please consider making a donation. Just go to our website at thedancecenter.ca, where you'll find extensive information about our upcoming programs and events. The music for the Dance Center podcast was composed by James B. Maxwell. Always a pleasure to connect with you through dance. Until next time.